Good morning, happy Monday. I just want to go over briefly a few more examples on domain and range because it is important that you understand it. All right, so we're just going to look at 4 quick examples and we're going to find the domain and range of them. All right, so the first example, we have this graph here in green. Okay, we want to find domain and range. If you remember, domain is x and range is y. Okay, so then we're going to look at our x-axis for domain. So we always want to start from smallest and work our way up to largest. So the smallest over we go on my x-axis. The smallest x value that we have in our points. Okay, so the furthest to the left we go is this point right here. Okay, if I extend this line where this point is, there are no other points further to the left of that line. So this point is the furthest left point on my function. Okay, so this is my smallest bound. Okay, the smallest limit for my domain. This number right here is at -2 on my x-axis. Okay, we care about where it's on our x-axis because we're doing domain, which is x. And then the furthest to the left would be right here, 3, but at 3 we have an arrow. If you'll remember from last week, arrows mean that you don't actually stop. Your graph is not stopping, it's continuing on, same kind of pattern, it's going up forever. So that means we're going from -2 on my x-axis all the way to infinity, okay? So our domain, you can write it a few different ways. We can say, since this is an open circle, it's not fully closed then, we can say our domain is -2 to infinity. Okay, both getting parentheses, since this one was an open circle and you can never actually reach infinity, so it gets an open circle. You can say, we can pick any value on my x-axis as long as that value is greater than or equal to -2. Okay, because all that matters is it has to be greater than or equal, not equal to. Ooh, sorry guys. Ignore that, not equal to. We have an open circle, right? Parentheses. Okay, this has to be any x value greater than -2, okay? Anything all the way to infinity. Another way you can write it is with both bounds. So we would flip this to have my -2 over here, less than x, and then my x has to be less than infinity. Okay, you've seen all of this before in Algebra 1. Hopefully you remember some of that, but these are all different ways that you can write domain. They all mean the same thing. It means your x has to be between -2 and infinity. X is anything greater than -2, so from -2 to infinity. And this means x has to be between -2 and infinity. Okay, they're all saying the same thing, just written a little differently. Range, we're looking at our y-axis. Okay, so range is your y values. We once again want to look at the smallest. Your smaller numbers are going to be towards the bottom. So the lowest down there we have a point. The lowest place we have a green point on our graph would be down here. This is at 1 on my y-axis. And then the highest up it goes, we have an arrow, okay? Which means it doesn't stop, it keeps going and going and going up to infinity. So range, we would write the same kind of way. We could do it from 1, because remember this point, if we were to look at this point, it's -2 on my x-axis, and then it's up at 1 on the y. So when we do domain, we're using just the x value. When we do range, we're doing just the y value. So it goes from 1 on my y-axis up to infinity. So we would say 1 to infinity. We could say any y value. This is range, so y is any y value greater than 1. Or we could say 1 is less than y, which has to be less than infinity. Next example, domain. So we are looking at our x-axis. The furthest to the left it goes, we have an arrow, which means we're not stopping. It's going to keep going and going to -infinity. And on the right, the greatest furthest to right we go is an arrow, which means it's going to keep going and going to infinity. So we say our domain goes from negative infinity to positive infinity. We can say it's from negative infinity less than x, which is less than infinity. So x is between negative infinity and infinity. Both mean the same thing. Or another way you could write it is you can just say your domain is all real numbers. And I'm going to run off the page. All real numbers. Because all numbers on my x-axis are going to lie between negative infinity and infinity. Okay? For range, we're looking at our y-axis because we're going from bottom to top now. Okay, your y-axis runs up and down. We're looking at our lowest that it goes. Okay, so the lowest that we have a point down here would be at -2 on my y-axis. Okay, this would be a closed circle because you actually have a line. They didn't leave an open circle there. So we have a closed circle at -2. And then the highest up it goes is all the way up here, but we have arrows, which means it's going to keep going up to infinity. Okay, so our range runs from closed circle, so bracket. Keep breaking my pencil lead. Okay, from -2 to infinity. -2 is less than or equal to y, which is less than infinity. Or you could say any y value that's greater than or equal to -2. You don't necessarily have to have that infinity on the end there because anything greater than -2 is going to go all the way up to infinity. So either of these work. All of these three things mean the same thing. Okay, domain. So we're looking at our x-axis. The furthest to the left that we go right here is a closed circle at -3 on my x-axis. And then the greatest we go, you're not looking at where it crosses your x, so we're not stopping at 3. The greatest, the furthest to the right we go is right here at 4 on my x-axis with an open circle. So we would say -3 with a bracket because it's a closed circle to 4 with a parentheses because it's an open circle. Okay? Or another way you can write it is -3 is less than or equal to, because closed circle, x, and then less than 4. Less than because it's an open circle. Okay? Range, we're going to do our y-axis. Okay? So the lowest, always smallest to largest, the lowest, the smallest value we have would be right here at -3 on my y-axis. And then the greatest up, we have a point. You're not stopping where you see a circle. Everything on this line is a point. So all the way up here at 4. So our domain and our range are actually the same, except -3 has an open circle. So for range, -3 gets a parentheses. And my 4 has it's got a point there. You don't see an open circle, so it gets a bracket. So our range would be -3 is less than y, which is less than or equal to 4. All right, last but not least, domain and range one more time. So domain x-axis, we're running from smallest to largest. So here are our limits, our bounds. Oops. So we're going from -3 on my x-axis, here's -3, all the way up to 5. Okay? 5 has an open circle. 3 has a closed circle. Or -3, sorry. So -3 to 5. -3 gets a bracket, and 5 gets a parentheses. Or we could say -3 is less than or equal to x, which is less than 5. For my range, we're looking at our y-axis. So the lowest that we have any points would be right here at 2. If you notice, one has a closed circle and one has an open circle. So if it was just an open circle, we would leave a parentheses. But since we also have a point that's closed circle, that means we do have a point that touches at 2 on my y, so it is going to get a bracket, okay? And then the highest up we have a point is right here, which is at 4 on my y-axis, and it is also a, keep breaking my lead, it is also a closed circle, so it gets a bracket as well. So my range, it runs from everything inside of that function is in between 2 and 4 on my y-axis. Just like on my x-axis, everything's between -3 and 5, okay? So 2 is less than or equal to y, which is less than or equal to 4.